Welcome, everyone, to today's Innovation Showcase, the first of four showcases that CIMM, the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement, will be running this year. My name is John Watts. I'm the MD of CIMM, and it's been my great pleasure and privilege to work with the incredible Sable me, putting together a fantastic agenda for today's discussion. We plan to dive deep into the latest innovations across the ecosystem, buy side, sell side, and vendors. Who are driving change, progress, and momentum in the identity space. We all know that identity has become one of the foundational building blocks of the modern TV, CTV ecosystem. And interestingly, the companies that are investing to drive progress are innovating our way out of trouble. We have found various problems during the course of the last 12 to 18 months, but the good news is they're well on their way to being solved. And so our plan for the day is to really dive deep into how innovators across the marketplace are helping to really progress this ecosystem. We have a fantastic packed agenda of speakers lined up here, listed. There's many of them will be presenting some really cutting edge stuff that they're working on, which should be incredibly exciting for everybody. Following today's event, we will be making a summary available and we'll be circulating recordings. So if you can't stay for everything, don't worry, there will be recordings available so you'll get to hear what these great innovators and leaders are doing to help drive progress in our ecosystem. That's all from me. I'll be back online about halfway through the session to lead a fantastic agency panel. But for now, I'm going to hand over to my friend and colleague Sable to take us through the first half of the session. Sable, over to you.
Thank you, John. So John warned me that this will be recorded, so I will do my best to stick to the script. Want to share a little bit with you guys about our group. The Identity and Data Collaboration Group exists to advance transparent, practical, and interoperable identity solutions across the EdTech and MarTech ecosystem. So together, we tackle the technical, methodological, and governance challenges shaping modern identity. We have been focusing on demystifying identity resolution services for buyers, improving IP to household accuracy, evaluating innovative identity signals and approaches, and advancing interoperability across the whole data ecosystem. This year, we're expanding that lens. We'll be exploring synthetic populations and how AI agents fit into the existing identity framework. It's exciting, it's scary. So ultimately, our goal is simple but ambitious. We want to promote scalable standards that strengthen cross-platform targeting, measurement, and meaningful collaboration across the industry. So we typically, this group typically meet on second Thursday of each month. Since April 2025, we've held 11 meetings and welcomed 34 speakers, including a few returning experts. I'm especially pleased that two of our good friends will be joining us again today. As everyone on this call knows, identity sits at the core of our ecosystem, and it's not getting any easier. Between fragmentation, evolving privacy regulation, rapid AI innovation, and shifting consumer behaviors, the stakes are only getting higher. That's exactly why this work matters. We believe you will find values in today's sessions, and if you have not attended our previous calls, we hope you will consider joining our group and continue the conversation. As John said, we have a packed agenda, so for all speakers, please be mindful of the time. With that said, let's kick off our first session. Please join me in welcoming Kemal Bokhari, Head of Data, Measurement, Analytics at Dish, for our opening Fireside chat.
Hello, Sable. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Kemal. Good to see you again. Great to have you. Thank you. So we're just going to jump right into it. You've been with Dish since 2017, and before that, you had a long tenure at TiVo working closely with data partners and leading data measurement initiatives. Can you walk us through your career journey and how your perspective on viewer data and identity have evolved over the past 2 decades?
Yes, I would be happy to. I started my career with a company called TRA, which was the first company to bring measurement for advertisers on the linear side by connecting set-top box data with frequent shopper card data, which was then ultimately acquired by TiVo. It We're in a very different landscape compared to then. Privacy is a lot more stricter now than it used to be. Um, Data used to be a it was not easy to get. Data was very difficult to acquire. But still, if you had your own first party data, you were in a good place. Data has always been kind of the oil that fuels the advertising industry. Uh, but as the years have come on and as I transitioned to my current role at Dish, um, that's when I got exposed to addressable TV, and working directly with advertisers from a targeting and measurement perspective. Identity is the kind of the backbone of all of that. And that is why, we launched Sling TV, which was also the first virtual MVPD that we did in 2018. And since then, we have um, done a lot of addressable campaigns across both Dish, satellite, and Sling TV platforms, where and we were the first one to work with ComScore on cross-platform measurement, and we launched that in 2018.
So I'm going to dive a little bit more on your view, specific on the viewer side. So first-party TV viewing data, whether it's from a set-top box or authenticated app logins, have long been a powerful asset. But we all know, each data set has its limit. So can you tell us what makes Dish's data set unique, especially when it comes to targeting and measurement?
So we sit on robust first-party data, because we have home addresses for our Dish subscribers, because you need to have a physical address, you need to do a credit check, and we need to be able to install a satellite dish on your roof. And then for our Sling TV platform, um, everything is authenticated with an email address and zip code and credit card information. So we have robust first party data that we are able to use in a privacy friendly way for targeting and measurement. And be, and linked to that is all the viewership data. Dish and Sling subscribers love to watch TV. And the thing that we have is we have a national data set where we have subscribers in every state in the US. So we're able, and unlike some of our MVPD colleagues, they are regional. We are not a regional player, we're a national platform. And because of that, our data set is in very high demand, and we do license it to the key measurement players that are out there today in the marketplace: Nielsen, ComScore, and VideoAmp. But that is it. It's our data set is not a commodity. We only are very strict on what those use cases are, and measurement is that strict use case that we do. And viewership data is not easy to work with. You need to have a lot of technical capabilities, because there was a coin that I used to a few years ago that set-top box data is dumb until you connect it to other data sets. And once you connect it to other data sets, then you are able to get that analytics that you're looking for to be able to understand how well that campaign performed.
Yeah, the connectivity is the key. So how can you elaborate a little bit more? How does Dish's data help to address the fragmentation in the identity resolution across those screens? Because you talk about the connectivity, and we know that when you have data set, even you own, different sites, it 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 doesn't always jive. You will see discrepancies, you will see gaps. So where do you see gaps, and then how do you plan to bridge that gap?
Yeah, so we have a data strategy where we're agnostic when it comes to working with LiveRamp, Experian, TransUnion, Epsilon, because we want to have a direct data integration with all of them. Everybody has their own ID spine that they use, from a targeting perspective and connecting the subscriber information. But by doing that, we're able to then bring back that ID system back into our house and be able to line it up against our own graph, where we have very good first party information about our subscribers, and we were able to create that unique dish ID that works across all of those partners.
And then you work with all the partners that several of them are going to speaking later. So I'm sure there are more questions coming from there. I want to come focus on the household portion because that's your core. So we talked about in the TrueSets research, a great research on IP to postal household match rates, and that rate is not very promising. So first thing first, how does Dish define a household?
So everything we do is at the subscriber level. And we have since everything is linked to a subscriber. So I'll start with the Dish portion. Everything Dish is a household. They're not individual users. There might be multiple devices, multiple set-top boxes in that household, but they all get rolled up into that same household address. And then on the Sling side, we still have that one user that we consider to be the household. And anybody else that is using that app, that login, we're able to roll up all of those devices into that one household through our customer graph. And again, you mentioned the CIMM, the TruthSet CIMM study about IP addresses. I mean, we've known that for years. That is I know there's a lot of addressable wannabes out there that use IP addresses, and they don't have a direct relationship with the consumer, but yet they feel that they're in addressable. I strongly disagree with that. For addressable, you need deterministic first party data, and that TruthSet study proved my point that IP addresses is not a true data point for you to use for targeting. You always need true subscriber information to know that what the household that you want to target from an advertising perspective is the right household. You don't want waste. Addressable is all about there is no waste because you know exactly what the audience is that you're targeting.
Can I just drill down slightly more on the household definition? Of course, for Dish, it's very clear. It's a physical location. You have the dish, you have whatever the device is, and the viewer in physically in there. But when it comes to Sling, when it's app, people do share login, and then if you have some your family traveling or they're in school, for example, it's the physical location will be different. In that case, the same resident or same users of both will belongs to different households. So how do you reconcile that? And what signals will you rely on mostly on resolving that kind of household identity discrepancies?
Yeah, so I think the way to do that would be, yes, we do leverage the device identifiers. We know when you create a graph out of those multiple devices, how devices are you seeing, what location they are connecting from. Again, IP address is also used. However, IP is not used from a targeting perspective. IP is used from kind of connecting the dots back to that unique household. Uh, but yes, you are right. People do share ID, but we have some, controls in place where we limit the number of times simultaneous connections someone might have through the Sling app. But ultimately, the email address, the location, the IP address, the device is what brings it all home.
Got it. So how often does your definition of a household need to adapt as the devices and viewer behavior change?
As we continue to analyze the activity of our subscribers, we're able to see based on, you know, how often they're watching, and then we may be able to then refine our graph. But for the most part, it's a lot of our viewing is done on the big screen. So of course, the big screen is very difficult to move, unlike a mobile device. So for the most part, our graph pretty much stays stable.
So when building your ID graph, what do you consider sufficiently reliable and consistent to use? Because we talk about, there's IP address, there's a device, and we know the device's ID is not always available, location is not always available, email is hiding, and then the people have so many different emails and it was outdated. So what do you consider the most reliable and consistent use? Do you ever need to prioritize skill over, accuracy or the other way around?
No, we are very key on accuracy. We feel deterministic data is much more important than probabilistic data. Hence the reason we use our first party data. We have authenticated with Sling viewership and be able to do the targeting and then do the measurement on the back end. Uh, and we rarely want to add noise to that situation because then our value proposition in the marketplace with our first party data gets diminished.
Okay. So I saw that we have questions coming, but we'll address that, hopefully leave some time. So you're responsible for upholding privacy policies across platforms. How do you balance evolving state level privacy regulations there? I mean, we've got 20 different and there are more, right? And with the precision accountability advertisers expect. So what guardrails are non-negotiable for you?
Yeah, so obviously, as you and I discussed a couple of days ago, there's no GDPR in the US. There's no federal mandate for privacy. California does their own things. Colorado does their own. And so we have a very small privacy and legal team based in Colorado who I partner with on a regular basis who stay up to speed on the various law changes across the country. And since we do have subscribers in every state, we take the lowest common denominator and use that as the being the more strict and apply it across all of our subscribers because we have the direct relationship with the consumers. Consumer privacy is utmost important for us because without those consumers, we don't have a business. So we want to make sure that there's no effect in the consumer's privacy, and we take this very seriously. And even whenever I am sharing data with a measurement partner, attribution partner, a targeting partner, it's always privacy. We start with privacy, with data security, and put all the legal guardrails around it. If you are not willing to put the effort to do all of that, we don't engage with you because privacy is not something that we can just put in the back seat. It's front and center, but it's the data protection agreements and anything else. We need to protect our data.
So I know that I got a pin on the timing. 2 minutes left, so we're going to jump into to the future. So we're at the beginning of 2026. What shifts do you believe will be most meaningful in reshaping identity and data collaboration in the TV ecosystem for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, whether it's technology, regulation, commercial models, or something else? And
I mean,
when we,
the big thing that's going to drive all of that is privacy.
Mhm.
Is where does the privacy, what happens in privacy in 3 months, in 6 months, in 3 years? That's going to be the key driver on what we ultimately are able to do as an advertising industry. Again, we have a lot of walled gardens. Walled gardens don't want to play nice with each other, so that's where a lot of the issues happen. But I know we are a part of Go Addressable. We're Go Addressable with all the MVPDs. We want to be open with our data. We want to be able to use our data in a privacy-friendly way. However, there's a lot of platforms out there that say that they're addressable, which they're not. There's a lot of confusion in the market. So there has to be a lot of consolidation in the future for it to really make it easier for the advertiser to be able to run addressable campaigns.
Got it. So when we look towards the 2030, word of advice, what should we be preparing for today?
I mean, again, if you don't have a privacy focus on everything you do in your business, you will be out of business. because consumers are a lot more smarter now than they were 3 months ago, 3 years ago. And everybody wants to make sure that their data is not shared in any without their knowledge and their permission. Opt-ins, opt-outs, all are in play. So I would say it starts with privacy and first-party data.
Thank you very much. We know there are questions coming from Q&A. We will try to address that since we're running out of time, address that at the end of the sessions or we will answering live on the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Kemal. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, please join me in welcoming Andy Johnson, Chief Data and Product Officer at Astra. In this session, Rethink Identity, Empowering Researchers Through Transparency. Andy will explore how greater transparency and control can empower brands to unlock more values from their identity strategy. He will introduce Connexa Identity Network and show how measurable signal strength and clear data provenance can help marketers balance the scale and precision. At the end of the session, he will leave us with a clear, more confident approach to building an identity foundation that drives real business results. Andy, the stage is all yours.
Well, thank you, Sable. I appreciate it. That was a very nice intro, and I also want to thank you and Kamal for your panel that you just did because although we didn't actually try to do this or coordinate it, it's a great setup for what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm Andy Johnson, as Sable said. I've been in the identity industry for about 30 years and worked at and with a number of the partners you know well. Spent a lot of time at Experian, a lot of time at Axiom, and LiveRamp as well. And what I've learned in that time is that there are a number of things that work really well in the identity space and there are a number of things that don't work so well. So, although I'll talk today about Adstra, the way I'd like to position this is that you think about what I'm talking about to you and with you should be how you should be thinking about talking to your identity provider as well, and how you should be rethinking what you should be asking of them. Can you give me control? There we go. So who's Adstra? Okay. Leading provider of composable identity solutions. I know everyone says that, so I'm not going to focus too much on the commercial part of it. My marketer made me put that in there. But let's talk about what composability really means. All right. Composability is about exposing our identity capabilities customized for your use case, making sure that we provide omni-channel identity in your environment with transparency and control. Now, I said that there are a number of things that that identity providers are doing well today. I think meeting partners in their environment is going pretty well. Even just a few years ago, you couldn't do work with a number of the larger players in a Databricks or Snowflake or AWS. GCP. You were required to work and send data into their world. And I think that that's been a really nice innovation. But transparency and control, those are still real challenges that we're hearing from our partners that they're seeing with their identity providers today. So let me talk a little bit about some of our core principles, but the way I'd like you to think about this is they're principles and things that you should demand and ask of your identity partner. The first thing is if whatever they're doing with you isn't about driving your growth, not their own growth, but your growth through meaningful interactions, through personalization, but not just personalization of the identity and the identities you're working with, but personalization in working with you as an enterprise and what your use case and what your goals are. If they're not giving you ownership control, the ability to hold the data where you want and without all the business rules around it, the transcoding and all the different taxes that are put on it, that actually leads into reducing the ad tax. What we see a lot and what our partners see a lot is every time they want to unlock a new use case, anytime they want to work with a new partner, they are required to pay another tax of some sort, another fee to unlock the coded identities that someone has provided to them. They're very good identity schemas and they're very good matches, but the reality is it doesn't allow you to grow your business. And then by doing all that, it allows you to gain deeper customer insights. It's all got to be done. I love how Kamal framed this up earlier in a privacy-centric way. a lot of people talk about privacy-centric systems, but there are really privacy design principles that are systematized that through our industry, through regulators that are true systems that you must adhere to. And you need to ensure that any partner that you're working with is using and is really holding true to those privacy principles. So let's talk first about, what are some of the observations? What are things that we hear every day? But I also want to frame this up that I would love to hear from each of you, things that you've heard. So reach out to me directly or through this panel, and I'd love to hear from what you're seeing. The first thing that we're hearing is tired of the black box. I think you all know what that means, right? I send stuff in, I get some sort of result, and it comes back out, but I don't really know what happens inside that black box. That is really driven by this business problem. Look at our match rate. Um, our match rate is what drives your success. But the problem with that is the match rate doesn't really tell you what is being matched to. And in measurement, that is a real problem. There's a lot of digital scrutiny that's happening right now. I want to see clarity on the identity resolution. I want to understand the connection of these different signals. Kemal and Sable talked about it, and I was on a panel earlier last year or late last year with John, where we talked about this study that TruthSet had around IP address connections and the lack of accuracy there. And I couldn't agree more. That's a problem because of what we call over association, right? I think in that study there were somewhere between 4 and 6 households connected to, or 4 and 6 IP addresses connected to each household. That's a problem with over association. If you're not updating that type of data every single day, IP addresses rotate very quickly. Absolutely, you're going to see over associations with that. And finally, there's this mandate around transparency. All matches are not equal. A match is not a match is not a match. So it doesn't matter if it's a 40% match rate or a 90% match rate. Within that, there are schema that you can understand what is the accuracy or how confident should I be in that connection between those two signals. Now, why has this happened? All right, it's because, whoops, sorry about that. Because identity became a business of it in and of itself, and it became decoupled from the brand or the partner's objectives. Really, it's all I talked about it a little bit ago. It's this scale trap, all right? The scale trap that happened because the business of identity started really around activation of audiences in digital platforms. And I'm not talking about PII-based identity that goes back to, my early days in hosted databases. I'm talking about omni-channel identity really got its inception around activation. And when the focus is activation, it's also a focus around volume-based compensation. The identity provider or the platform makes money based upon the number of identities that they're pushing through that platform or that they're resolving. And the incentives of the industry really focused on that volume-based compensation. But you all who've worked in the measurement world know what problems that causes when everything that I work with is based upon scale and not necessarily the accuracy of the scale. And that has created a massive incentive gap between the sellers of identity and the users of identity. So, what's the next step? What are we hearing? We're hearing that it's time to break free from that black box, right? I want to understand. If I'm a user of identity, I want to understand the provenance of the data. Where are you getting your identity signals? How often are you updating those identity signals? How are you validating those identity signals? I want to move away from a graph that over associates to justify scale. I want to understand the precision associated with it and eliminate all of that bloat. And then this is probably the biggest thing that we're hearing is that if I'm a partner and I'm speaking from your perspective, I want to operate on my terms. My business is going to evolve, right? I don't want to operate inside the provider's business model. I want you to customize your business model to how it is that I work and how it is that I need to grow my business. So from that perspective, I'm going to talk a little bit about some innovations. All right. So you're going to hear a lot of presentations. I would imagine there will be people talking about, artificial intelligence. There'll be a lot of AI conversation. There's going to be some conversation around data collaboration, and how you can work together in data collaboration environments. The question that we should be asking ourselves when it comes to innovation is, what approaches can we take together so we as partners can enable you to grow your business? Those are the type of innovations we should focus on. And I'm going to frame that out in 4 different types of innovations that we at Adstra think about when we're working with partners, and I would encourage you to think about as well. The first is really around the innovation of transparency. This should not be an innovation, right? I laughed when we put this in our presentation. This should just be a matter of course, that everyone who does business together should be completely transparent. But I've been in this industry a long time, and I just know that what sits behind the curtain very often isn't exactly what you hope it to be. I want that transparency so I can understand what is being linked together, how it's being linked together, how it's interoperable. I want to own that. I want it in my environment, in my walls, and I want to see it. I don't just want a key associated with it. I want to see the emails or the mobile devices or even the IP addresses or the set-top box IDs. I want to see what you're linking together so I can start pressure testing all of that. And then in a lot of cases, most partners work with multiple identity partners. And I want to be able to do that and be able to see the incrementality that I get from each partner, because there are some partners that may provide me value that other partners do not. And I want to be able to see that and understand the incrementality associated with that. The second thing I want to describe is that there should be this innovation around, we'll call it identity velocity. Legacy identity companies, legacy identity graphs are very often static point in time clusters. There's a lot of black box logic, there are a lot of transcoded IDs. There's this one size fits all approach. Identity is no longer a snapshot. It is a story. It is a story with a great deal of velocity. Think of each of you and all of the movements that you have any particular day, all of the different devices that you're connected to, all the different ways that you're connected to those devices. So think of it as a story. The next thing you got to think about is how it is I tap into that network or that story. All right. This is about access. So I talked about the business model. I talked about the way that we think about identity. Now it's about access into it. You should be asking for access into the network around that ever evolving and ever resolving story around consumers. And I'm going to circle this here. Everything that is connected to one of your partners, everything that is associated should be connected to a household and an individual. And I know that shouldn't be an innovation, but it is. It is an innovation that most partners should be thinking about. There shouldn't be just all these over associations. We do deal with this a lot with partners in the digital ecosystem, where there are a lot of associations of IDs, but they're not grounded in people and households. I think you heard Kemal talk about that, grounded to a first party. You probably hear that with Block Graph as well, connected to a household. I think it's extremely important that that network that is ever resolving and ever evolving, that you have access to that you can connect it. And finally, you need control, all right? Absolute control. I'm checking my time here. I've got a couple minutes left here, I think, but you need absolute control so you can manage that massive scale of IDs. You can manage the signal strength and understanding the different connections. As I said, a match is not a match. That identity network, that identity partner that you work with should allow you to work in your environment under your terms, right? So I'm just going to talk real quickly about how, at least at Adstra, you can tap into our network and how we work with partners. And I think you should be asking your partners to work this exact same way. The first is we allow, when I talk about Connexa, I'm talking about a Connexa network of identity signals and all of the software that allows you to connect those together. We allow for partners to install that in environment so they can do that work themselves. However, if they don't have that capability, we can collaborate in clean rooms, and you should require that from your partners as well. And that clean room should be anybody's clean room, right? Shouldn't be just the one that they sell. Could be an AWS clean room, it could be a Snowflake clean room, and then there should be a workspace of some form that that partner should be able to provide to you as well, some sort of user-friendly UI. And then I'll just wrap this up by saying there are a few questions that you should be asking of your partners and you should be asking of yourself as well. How resilient is my identity spine across platforms, devices, and time? How do I trace the provenance of those signals and how they connect to people and households? As Kemal said, this is extraordinarily important when it comes to managing consumer privacy, understanding the provenance of the data. How can you configure your graph based upon your use case? Sable brought this up. Scale versus precision. It's not one size fits all. You must be able to configure that based upon what your use case is. Can you measure and leverage the strength of those signals that are being connected? And then finally, does your provider allow you to bring it into your world so you can control it yourself? So I'll leave you with all that. I appreciate the time. I know it was a whirlwind. Sable's smiling. I think I nailed it with like 15 seconds to spare.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much. Couldn't agree with you more about transparency, and I would definitely follow up. I think I would like to invite you back to our monthly call, have some deeper dive on some of the points. Thank you.
Absolutely. Would love to do it.
Next, let's welcome Scott Kosub, Vice President of Product Management at Experian. Scott will focus on one of the fastest growing categories in digital advertising, healthcare. As we know, healthcare advertising operates under some of the most complex regulatory and privacy constraints. As a direct-to-consumer and healthcare professionals advertising escalate, compliance has become the critical enabler of scale. So in his session, Scott will explore how identity regulation in healthcare differs fundamentally from other verticals, covering how tokenized patient identities and deterministic MPI-based professional identities power privacy-safe activation and closed-loop measurement, which is really, really challenging. I've done that before. I know why connecting exposure back to the CIMM identity frameworks is essential for outcome-based optimization. Beyond traditional ID-based targeting, the session will also highlight how identity signals can train advanced modeling and AI systems to unlock contextual intelligence, enabling advertisers to responsibly expand reach beyond deterministic ID environment. Scott, please take it away.
Great, Sable. Thank you so very much. It's awesome to be here. Appreciate the time. So good afternoon. My name is Scott Kosub. I'm the VP of Product at Experian Marketing Services. And as Sable laid out, wanted to really talk about sort of the evolution of identity resolution through the lens of healthcare advertising. Healthcare forces us to rethink identity, not just as a matching layer, but as an infrastructure for activation, for measurement, and future-proofed intelligence. I lead product for our activation suite, as well as product strategy and innovation across Experian Marketing Services' full product portfolio. And over the last several years, we've been working very closely with healthcare platforms, pharmaceutical brands, and health data providers to try to solve a unique challenge, which is, as Sable laid out, how do you activate in measure in one of the fastest growing advertising categories without breaking privacy, compliance, or any degree of trust? And that challenge is really only accelerating as time goes. So there is growth in healthcare advertising right now. Healthcare and pharma digital ad spend is accelerating. It's nearing 25 billion and growing double digits year over year. Social alone was over 6 billion last year in the direct-to-consumer side. B2B, which is really sort of the healthcare professional side of the business, is up 11% year over year. So that growth is really happening on both of those fronts, right? The direct-to-consumer advertising, which has massive scale and really high consumer demand, and focused on healthcare professionals, or HCPs. And that is where a concept called National Provider Identifier, or NPI. It is a federal-based identifier that identifies healthcare professionals. And that's where you're really targeting these healthcare professionals, the cardiologists, the dentists, the nurse practitioners. And that really requires precision. So just as the folks from Adstra just talked about, This isn't just about scale. This is about precision as well. And both of these sides of the business are scaling. Both require verified identity, and both sides of this are highly regulated. And I think that's the key difference that we start to see inside of healthcare. Most of these verticals, identity is about scale. Retail, CPG, it's all about how big can the audiences be. At least it has been historically. And in healthcare, identity is about compliance and precision. So the limiting factor isn't spend. It's really sort of this whole level of compliant identity. And we really think of that as why there is a key difference when you get into the healthcare space. Healthcare also operates across two parallel identities, which make it kind of unique from some of the other verticals you end up interacting with. On the consumer side, you're dealing with highly sensitive health-derived insights from claims and clinical data. That really requires tokenization. There is also degrees of suppression that get applied. So as people think about modeling, they still apply suppression unless they actually have explicit permission to use the data, because you can't use PHI data directly in marketing and advertising. So that also leads to a strict separation from digital identifiers when you're dealing with the consumer side. Tokenization creates that privacy bridge between the health data and then the media ecosystem. And on the other side of this, you're looking at the professional side, right? Where again, we have deterministic identity tied to that national provider identifier, that NPI. And these are licensed providers, right? They're people with known specialties, the cardiologist, for example. And here's where we resolve NPI to digital IDs, which enables that precision targeting and ultimately more deterministic measurement, because you want to be able to get in front of the right healthcare professionals with precision, and then be able to tie that measurement feedback so that you can measure the impact of those campaigns. So we have one healthcare ecosystem, but we really work on two different identity layers for D2C as well as the HCPs. Sorry, I'm having trouble advancing the slide. Come on. There we go. Sorry, I think I jumped forward too far. If we could go back one. There we go. Great, thank you. So in healthcare, identity resolution has three primary jobs. First, it's going to translate regulated data into these activatable audiences. As I mentioned earlier, we can't activate claims data directly. So identity needs this abstraction layer to protect it. Second, we want to expand reach without exposing sensitive inputs. And this is where we use modeling and graph expansion without ever commingling PHI or digital IDs. And we want to do it through the right lens, right? Again, if you're really trying to reach healthcare professionals, you've got to be careful with the level of expansion that you apply, because you really want to make sure that you're still getting in front of those professionals. And then third, we want to enable measurement back through that same identity framework so that we can take the digital IDs, if it's been run sort of in a programmatic space, and connect via the same identity layer that the providers need to tie that to their claims and clinical data for measurement. So I targeted an HCP. Did they end up filling different scripts, right? Being able to connect that those exposures back to outcomes. So tokenization enables that compliance level at a patient side, and NPI enables that at an HCP side. And that's both targeting as well as measurement. And that's really where we play a role in sort of this full funnel healthcare engagement. Activation, though, today is only one part of it. And so I'll try to advance the slides. I seem to be having some problems. If someone else could maybe help me get to the next slide further forward. Thank you again. This is where I think the innovation is accelerating beyond your historic activation capabilities. Historically, you've had identity about matching people to media. So you use deterministic linkage. You had direct ID linkage for activation. In healthcare, identity is becoming more powerful at unlocking future capabilities for contextual relevance. And this is where identity becomes a signal that's used to train models, not just the mechanism for activation. So in this approach, we are using deterministic cohorts to train models that detect correlated contextual signals in environments where IDs don't exist. So we start by using tokenized patient audiences and NPI-based HCP segments. Those become training seeds. And with that, we're able to analyze what content ends up over-indexing in certain environments. It helps us identify endemic as well as non-endemic affinities. So where's their strong signal that wouldn't be a natural assumption for the target audience? So it starts to unlock net new areas that you might not traditionally think of. And then you're able to train the AI models to continue to detect contextual signal correlated with those identity groups and refine that. And so that moves us beyond just an ID-based activation. It moves us to an identity-informed intelligence. That also opens up the ability to reach into cookieless or privacy-forward environments. It gives brands, even if they don't want to target direct audiences, they now have capabilities to unlock. And I think the real benefit is a blend of both deterministic identity with that contextual expansion to begin to move into a whole new area. So again, if I could maybe get help with one more slide advancement, as I seem to be struggling. This is really where we see healthcare evolving and changing. Today, you really are focused on deterministic identity, either via that NPI or that token. We're thinking about modeled expansion, the data providers provide to apply on top of their data sets that help them remove PHI. There's contextual intelligence where that identity isn't necessarily available. And then we think about how does that tie back to privacy safe measurement that can help inform ongoing optimizations. And so the shift isn't about matching more IDs. It's really using identity as this infrastructure and intelligence level that lets us have ID-based as well as intelligent-based activation capabilities that we can measure, that we can optimize to, and we can compliantly provide. So leaders in the space are going to build privacy-aware identity infrastructure that support this vertical. They're going to help connect activation and measurement to the seamless process so that anything that's activated can be measured and optimized. We'll continue to look at how AI trains smarter contextual models, including feedback for where it's over and underperforming to continue to make it better. And we'll be able to extend reach beyond ID-only environments. So healthcare growth demands that infrastructure layer that provides all of this. And we see this is where identity resolution really sort of plays out. It's not just a connectivity layer, but it's compliance, it's intelligence, and it's this foundation for sort of modern healthcare advertising. So in closing, healthcare identity resolution isn't just about how can I make this the biggest match possible. It's about building a privacy bridge between these regulated environments and media execution that allows us to connect activation with outcomes so that we can just be smarter and more intelligent with advertising on an ongoing basis. So with that, thank you. Sable, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I learned a lot as well. And then we have a question now. We have 2 minutes, so I would like to address a question. There's a attendee asked that can consumer opt out of a tokenization so their data isn't used? Can HCPs opt out?
Yes, there is the ability to opt out. Those opt-outs do flow back into the ecosystem so that the providers are able to properly manage that. So yes, consumers do have the ability to opt out.
Thank you very much. So if again, I mean, this is something like if this is something most of us probably did not have a chance to dive so deep. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to circle back with more questions and learning more for all our rights and also for all of those increasingly popular healthcare advertising. Now we know that how do they get their information and how do we end up on the receiving end of those messages. So next, I'd like to welcome my old friend, Chief Revenue Officer of BlockGraph, Alex Schneider. Most business outcomes will happen in the real world, near stores, in neighborhoods, and with communities. As identity evolves, the real opportunity lies in bringing those physical contexts into how TV is planned, targeted, and measured. In this session, Alex will explore how BlockGraph connects identity and proximity, helping campaigns better reflect the environment where decisions are made and purchases actually happen. Please welcome Alec.
Thanks, Sable. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. So, let's see here. Use the arrows, right? There we go. So I want to start by kind of just talking about the importance of household identity as the bridge that really does connect advertisers and media sellers, through common consumer data points. And kind of going back to what Kemal was talking about, and how important it is for media owners who have first-party data, specifically when it comes to household identity, how they want to utilize that data to work with advertisers. It really is the household identity that is the bridge between advertisers and media suppliers, the relationship that exists from a consumer's perspective, for their ISPs and their video distributors, along with their uh, local advertisers and the advertisers that they work with and buy from, and where they live. These are all important data points that really do bridge the transaction that actually happens between advertisers and media suppliers. So the importance of household identity is key to how our business operates, and the importance of deterministic. Now, block graph, we sit in a very interesting position because we actually are not an identity provider, we're an identity infrastructure. And we allow media companies who have those relationships with consumers, who have the data, who have household identity, to be able to utilize that when it comes to working with advertisers who also have relationships with consumers and potential household identity and other signals that they can use as a common way to transact between partners. So I think it's an important understanding in terms of the recognizing that we talk about data ownership and we talk about, who has information, but really it is the relationship that exists between media suppliers, media distributors, and consumers, and the relationship that exists between advertisers and consumers. That is the bridge. Household identity is the bridge between advertisers and media suppliers. So block graph, a little bit about who we are. As I mentioned, we're not a graph. We are actually infrastructure. We're infrastructure that is underpinned by universal household identity. We allow media companies, distributors, ISPs, to use their real world data to create what we call a universal household ID called the block graph ID. That same functionality also exists on the advertiser side. So we provide solutions for media sellers and advertisers to work together with the real world data in creating high performance TV audiences. It's used to reach the right household and neighborhoods and to support measurement business outcome. It's a common identity structure that allows first-party data owners who have relationships with consumers to create a common ID structure to work with together. We are backed by major video and ISP distributors who are using our technology in the ways that they want to work with advertisers and recognize, obviously, privacy is first and foremost most important, but they want to be able to utilize their first-party data in working with advertisers' first-party data across the ecosystem to make TV in all its form more accurate and accountable. Our platform really supports the ability for, as we mentioned, audience targeting, utilizing first-party data, campaign measurement, sales matchback, an advertiser being able to upload offline sales directly and working with a media company's impressions. So campaign measurement, a lot of the utilization of first-party data, both for targeting and measurement. And one other area which I'm going to talk about today is around proximity and the importance of location. If we go back to my previous slide about the bridge, household identity be a bridge, one key item is a factor for advertisers, for households, and for media providers. Location is a really important aspect when it comes to understanding household identity and what that means for advertisers and suppliers to be able to better target and to work utilizing that core piece of household identity. So one thing in terms of trends that is really important, and this does go back to the role that household identity plays, and specifically when it comes to the understanding that for distributors like Dish and Comcast and Charter, their understanding of the household at the individual household level, as well as the signals that are associated to that household identity, are critical when it comes to targeting specifically not only on linear, but in the obviously large area of CTV growth. And so one area that in the big trend for 2026 is that local video and is a huge driver for CTV growth, right? So digital, specifically when it comes to local advertising, video is leading the shift when it comes to local advertising and CTV growth. And as we know in today's marketplace, a lot of CTV is being targeted utilizing IP address. And we talked about the true set scenario and the case study they did and the importance of is IP an accurate way to target? And clearly IP by itself is not an accurate way to target. It's a means to an end. The most accurate way for targeting really comes to understanding the household and understanding the signals in that household. And so as you think about the fact that streaming is capturing budget from linear viewership and the world of addressable is really important in CTV, local advertising is addressable. In itself, local advertising requires accuracy and addressability given the nature of how IP works, right? And the importance of household identity that's tied to those IPs and tied to those signals to be accurate when it comes to local advertising beyond just what we call a zip code. A zip code is local, but in the world of local advertising, and I want to say local doesn't necessarily mean it could be a national brand, goes back to the continued momentum is around hyperlocal, right? And what does hyperlocal mean? Hyperlocal means specifically that there's a radius from a household when it comes to advertiser's store. We're talking about true offline sales, true in-store brick and mortar type of requirements. And so the trend here about CTV growth is coming from local video. That's clear. Local video is in its nature in itself needs to be addressable to be more accurate, including audiences and demographics and any other data set, and the momentum around proximity and hyperlocal. How close is a store to someone's home is a very important factor when it comes to advertising and purchases. As a matter of fact, household identity for proximity and measurement, 82% of all purchases still happen in store, right? Doesn't mean that individuals don't go to websites and do their research and analysis. And yes, there's definitely a lot of e-commerce happening. I'm not minimizing what's going on in the e-commerce world, but in the world of local advertising, regional advertising, 82% of sales still happen in store. And so what we've looked out to do as we continue to sit on top of this really important household identity structure, and that we're building solutions for distributors and ISPs to better engage with advertisers, we set out to say, okay, we see where the trend's going. How do we build solutions using this powerful identity framework we have to support what's happening in terms of advertisers' minds of, I need to go more local. I need to be thinking about proximity. I need to understand the household associated to my stores. That's an important factor. And targeting and addressability is key to that. And so this allows for, ISP and distributors to get the most accurate local-based targeting for CTV. Because they know the household identity, because they understand the signals associated because they work with those consumers, with those households. They really have a prime position when it comes to being able to provide solutions around proximity-based targeting for advertisers. And it does determine the distance between targeting. So I just got my 5 minutes. So let me move on for this one. In doing so, there's lots of local advertisers. So we had to streamline our solutions where we provide capabilities for an advertiser working with a media partner to simply register for block graph, and then allows them to upload their first-party data and working with those media partners for targeting and measurement. Very simple. Sign up within an hour or two. They have the ability to log in, drop their files, whether it be for measurement or for targeting. So we streamline it for scale across thousands of advertisers. Next slide here. When it comes to proximity, we also recognize that a neighborhood, a zip code, needs to be more granular. Understanding that a zip code for local targeting might not be good enough when it comes to understanding the desires of a household identity, the demographics of those households, of those neighborhoods, how close they are to one store, to multiple stores. So we built a solution that really thinks about not only local targeting at a zip level, but even more granular, local targeting at a neighborhood level, at a zip 4 level, or even at a household level. So we built a solution specifically that allow for the ability for advertisers and sellers to go in and create. I'm having a tough time turning the slides here. Simply create proximity-based segments that start from an understanding of zip 4s down to a household, utilizing block graph IDs, using census level demographic data, a variety of solutions that in real time, an advertiser or a seller can create proximity-based audience segments using household identity and ID resolution that can be up to 200 storefronts in a given region. And create those segments in real time and be able to deliver them to a media partner so they can target not only against a demographic and other information, but a clear proximity based on 1 mile, 5 mile radius. Really depends on the advertiser's desires and what their goals are and what they think is the right formula for proximity-based targeting. It's clear there's been studies out there for consumers that recognize that distance matters depending on frequency of a purchase or what you're looking to buy. And so as we think about household identity and the partners we work with, we want to provide them solutions that takes advantage of their first-party data, their household identity, along with an understanding that advertisers, as they think about, specifically retailers, how far can, what's the right proximity to my storefronts, and the importance of addressable local advertising. Where should I be delivering my media? And we believe that the distributors who have such a strong relationship with those households are in a prime position to take advantage of this continued movement for local advertisers when it comes to their desire to have more accurate CTV, to focus on addressable because it's important and it's targeted, and to understand that proximity is a factor when it comes to outcomes for driving in-store results. And that's my proximity-based solution, Sable.
Thank you, Alec. You know how location data or location is so dear, and yeah, we can address a lot more. So we definitely invite you back. Thank you. So next, we have a brilliant panel on innovations in identity resolutions from the agency perspective. Please welcome my good friends, Rachel Casisa, Vice President of Platform Adoption at Epsilon, Sebastian Ernu, Chief Client Solution Officer at Analog, and Aaron Ledwith, SVP Strategic Partnership Solutions at Dentsu. This session will be moderated by our brilliant John Watts, who needs no intro. John, it's all yours.
That's very kind, Sable. Sadly, the brilliant John Watts couldn't make it, so you're stuck with me, folks. But don't worry, we will power through. First of all, just to echo Sable's thanks, Rachel, Sebastian, and Aaron, we couldn't be more pleased to have the three of you here. This is going to be really interesting. So I thought we could just start with the big picture. I'd love just to hear each of the three of you in turn give us your sense today within the TV and CTV marketplace, the ecosystem, what's in place and working well from an identity point of view, and what really isn't. Rachel, why don't you kick us off? Just before you do, give us just by way of context, just 10 seconds on your role. What do you look after?
You got it. So I kind of call myself like a Rosetta Stone for identity and AI at Epsilon. Those concepts can be very complicated. And so my job is to kind of help break things down into digestible chunks so that everyone can understand.
Wow.
Yeah. So in terms of CTV, or I would say that what's working is, as technology is evolving, identity is getting a little bit stronger there. I think that our ability to target, to get to more addressable, like truly addressable audiences is getting better. Where I still think that we need more improvement is some perhaps standardization of how those device IDs are coming through in the different bidding channels and the different media channels, so that we can get a little bit more consistency around the households that we're seeing and start to make up for some of the IP address sort of fiasco that we're all sort of aware of from that truth set study, and get to a little bit more of an addressable way to identify households, have that to be a little bit more persistent and consistent over time.
So summarizing brutally, you're saying, I think that the good news is there's a lot of identity out there.
Yes.
The bad news is it's not always easily consistent or comparable.
Correct. Yes.
Got you. Fantastic. Sebastian, over to you, sir. Tell us a bit about what you do, and then what's your take? What's in place and working well, and what really isn't?
So on my side, I lead data technology analytics for Omnicom Media in North America. To answer your question, I think it's become better. Still a lot of work to do. We have the infrastructure now with like variety of technology for clean rooms. We have the ability to integrate and communicate with partners in the marketplace. Where we are still struggling is the cross device, right? And like everybody's watching multiple screens at once. With the householding, you don't know who is in front of the TV. You obviously don't know who's watching. So this is the probabilistic part that we still need to work on. But we've made a lot of progress on deterministic, and I would say the other piece that is still difficult is how open and transparent the publishers are, right? It's the ability for us to do measurements, the ability, like what is working is the ability to push audience segments from our platforms into activation. What's more difficult is getting a better understanding of measurement and performance. And we're working with the big networks to get access to more data to be able to do this.
That's really interesting, Sebastian. So again, summarizing brutally, the challenge that you and your peers grapple with is, I think, what the great Andre Swanston of True Optic, which some of you may recall, used to refer to as the PhD problem. How do we translate between people, households, and devices? And I guess the challenge that creates is the classic one. It's incrementality. It's if we need identity to deduplicate, to understand the unique contribution of each platform, we need consistent identity. We have a lot of identity, but we don't have consistent identity.
Exactly.
Wonderful. I'm glad I'm keeping up. Aaron, over to you, sir. Tell us a bit about what you do, first of all. Then what's your take? What's in place and working well, and what really isn't?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. At Dentsu, I look after all of our partnerships as it's related to, well, data measurement and then media activation, primarily on our Dentsu.connect platform. So what used to be M1, what used to be Mercury, is today Dentsu.connect. First, I'll say, Rachel, Sebastian, I was happy to hear your takes, your talking points. Made me feel like I'm not alone in these thoughts and these battles that we're facing. And you've taken the highlights of what I was going to say, which is I think what's working well is we've developed this process as an industry of interoperability, where today we can talk to major TV networks, we can talk to these CTV platforms and utilize our identity resolution in a consistent way across all of those. However, where we're struggling is that stability or that standardization, which kind of leads back to measurement. How do we expose these signals? How do we use these signals to support things like a closed loop measurement or how it directly impacts client campaigns? And so I think that's where we're going next. The good news is we've built the plumbing, right? The pipes exist, but our consistency and ability to deliver through those pipes still has improvements to be made.
And Aaron, just briefly, is it fair to say that that problem is amplified by the dynamism of the ecosystem? In other words, consumers, households, devices don't stand still. They keep changing. People are always moving. It's not just IP address. This is a profoundly dynamic and evolving ecosystem. So you can't just say, good news, we've built an audience graph, job done, I can head home now and leave my colleagues to do their work. It's more complicated than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also have to think of the different signals that each of our media partners have, right? Like that graph is evolving, but so are the signals that those partners have, where some have direct PII, they have name and address, and that shifts much less frequently than an IP or a device ID even. And so kind of stitching all of those pieces together is what will end up with that stability. But we have to do so in a way that understands the signals that our partners are receiving today, and then fully makes use of them collectively.
Cool. Okay, let's jump on. Sebastian, obviously, I suspect this is a very expert audience, but just to refresh us, give us a sense of what you see as the really mission critical use cases for identity. As a major agency group, what are the things you really need to use identity for, which are very hard to do without it?
So three categories of work, right? One around the insight and how we get to a better understanding of consumers for our brands. And to pile on that, a lot of our clients have first-party data now. Like in that's something that has really changed over the last like 4 or 5 years with Google pushing for cookie deprecation. Everybody has built their first-party data because it was becoming much more important. But our clients' first-party data is limited to the signals that they can capture. We obviously have much more depth. So building audience insights using first-party and using third-party data. The second piece is audience activation. So how do we, once we have these audiences, and once we have created those segmentations, how do we bring them to life and activate them for better performance? And the third piece that's becoming now more prominent with our clients is measurement. So how do we close the loop and understand the importance of each touch point? And with identity graphs that we have now that work across all channels from CRM to media to paid media, it's very interesting to see the dynamics between each touch point and what contribution we get.
Just briefly, Sebastian, when you say importance there, are you trying to weight those touch points in some way? Exactly.
That's the principle of attribution, right? We are trying to understand how each touch point contributes to an outcome.
So Rachel, are those broadly the same three use cases as you are familiar with and work with, or anything to add?
I'm gonna say he stole my thunder. He did. It's fine.
This definitely gets harder as we go.
Yes. I would say, one other use case is to, I like Sebastian, where you talked about how clients are working on building up more of their first party data. I think that's absolutely true. We're seeing that as well. So, helping them to amplify those signals and take and use that first party data in the most efficient and effective way possible, and applying that to how we see some of these signals across all of the channels so that they can leverage that specifically in the CTV space, I think is another use case.
Cool, that's a great one to add. Aaron, this is definitely the hardest one to go last on. Anything to throw into the mix, or should we jump on?
I'm happy to jump on. I mean, I think
Let's do that.
The only thing I'll say is our goal across those use cases is to use identity to help bring clarity, accountability in who you're reaching, and drive business outcomes for those clients. Ultimately, that's all we're trying to do is get to those achievable outcomes on the basis of identity.
Okay, Aaron, you had an easy question there, so I'm going to give you the hard one now. I'm sure lots of you will be familiar with the great Mike Bregman. And Mike previously was at Havas, of course, where he looked after data and identity. He's now moved to the marketing side, the dark side. But I had the great pleasure of moderating a discussion with Mike, during which Mike tabled something which we've been referring to as the Bregman hypothesis. But the Bregman hypothesis is that there is no inherent competitive advantage for an agency or its clients of the agency owning its own identity spine. It's entirely fine to work with third parties. So if you think about the kind of classic build by partner equation, his argument was you can partner or buy, you don't need to fundamentally own it. Interestingly, other people have suggested that, of course, if you don't own one, you would say that, wouldn't you? And actually, it's neither nor. There's an opportunity to do both. You can own your own identity spine and also work with lots of third parties. Give us your take. I mean, do you think agencies really need to own and maintain their own spines and graphs?
I think there's strong advantages to doing so. So I understand both sides. At Dentsu, we take a hybrid approach. We do both.
Right.
Kind of owning your own identity graph kind of creates a strategic advantage where you have control, you're able to customize to the needs of your clients. You have the ability to build your own IP that reflects the needs of those clients, and it enhances that long-term stability of that identity graph. So you're not switching or reliant upon a third party. And that's key, especially as those identifiers, like we talked about at the start, evolve. And we start talking about different inputs and different partners. However, I will say kind of building and maintaining that proprietary graph requires a lot of investment, data governance, technical oversight. It's a huge investment. So you can gain advantages in working and partnering with vendors who have the specialized ability to tap into their own product and engineering departments to help scale when you can't carry that full operational burden yourself. So like I said, we take that hybrid approach. We invest in our persistent identity spine to provide that differentiation, and then we integrate best-in-class partners when it accelerates outcomes for our clients.
So I'm hearing very loudly that it's not either or. There's definitely a case for both. Rachel, you on the same page?
Obviously I might be a little bit biased here.
I thought you might be.
Considering our big investment in connected identity with Publicis. But yeah, I mean, we always want to try to meet clients where they are, right? And so, we believe that Epsilon's identity is best in class. I know that there's maybe a couple of people on this showcase that may or may not disagree, but that's okay. We can battle it out. Yeah, I think that there is benefit to owning your own data. It is one of the ways that you can ensure a super high bar of quality in terms of accuracy, depth of knowledge and understanding, continual maintenance and progressive growth of that particular data set. And so there's certainly ways that you can that are advantageous of owning your own identity spine. But if you are a good partner, like we hope that Epsilon is, we also work with lots of other identity solutions out there, especially across the globe, so that we can make sure that we are wherever our clients want us to be. So yes, I guess the long-winded answer to that is a hybrid approach is probably the best. because you definitely want to work with a high quality identity resolution partner, but you also want that partner to be interoperable with all of the places that you want to buy media and where you want to try to reach your consumers. So yeah, hybrid approach for the win.
Sebastian, are you on the same page?
I actually have an interesting perspective on this because as of like 3 months ago, we didn't have a data asset, right? And in this panel, you have 3 representatives from agencies that have bought a data asset at some point. And I would have been interesting to have someone from WPP or another network or Havas to tell us about their experience. On my side, so we spent a lot of time building our own through partnerships. And we have learned a whole lot of the dynamics of the identity of how to build a strong network of partners to get access to data. Now, we obviously have our Axiom through IPG, and it's very interesting to see, one, the strength of the identity. Obviously, 60 years of experience working in that space that is extremely valuable for us and for our clients. And then I think the right combo for us is having that data asset, but also having the experience of working more like in more scrappy setting and building the data science skills, building the audience skills. And so that puts us in an interesting position that we have used many data sets over the years. We have learned about what works, what doesn't. And so having that combo of strong identity and expertise in what's available in the marketplace puts us in a really different position on this.
A critical thing to me seems to be that agility, flexibility, and optionality feel key, that there isn't a one-size-fits-all set of client requirements. So
Exactly.
the ability to work with different partners flexibly across the ecosystem feels hugely important. Let's jump on a little bit then and talk about data quality. So there obviously have been studies, Rachel alluded to them in her opening remarks, that suggest that there are some parts of the ecosystem where data quality is an issue. And I think we all have to be sympathetic to the data and identity companies that operate, because this is a really challenging marketplace. And arguably, with privacy regulations still ramping up, it's going to get more challenging, not less. Tell us a little bit about how your agencies are helping your customers navigate some of these data quality problems and issues. Aaron, why don't you kick us off, and then we'll go to Sebastian, then Rachel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we try and keep it out of the hands of our clients and do a lot of that QA and kind of protection ourselves, or evaluation
Do you think
ourselves.
clients want to know?
I think they do, right? And we need to be transparent around telling them if there are issues. Clients are in themselves experts, right? And we don't want to shy away from that, but we also want them to trust that what we're doing is protecting their best interests and informing them rather than asking them to do any incremental work. So what we're doing is we track the drift of match rates over time. We make sure we have multiple connectors across multiple partners to ensure we have the most persistent connection. We operate a signal level QA inside our clean room frameworks where we're providing the transparent reporting. So that way, when we do tell our clients around some of the difficulties or outline some of the options that they have, we're helping them to choose the data sets based on kind of their fitness for purpose rather than broad marketing claims, so that they have the information they need to make those decisions.
God, that's super helpful. Sebastian, give us a take. How do you approach some of these data quality issues? How do you help clients navigate around some of the issues?
So we're obviously doing constant testing of solutions available in marketplace, and we've defined a source of truth that we benchmark against, and that helps us understand the quality of the data set. So again, like in the past, we had a really strong process of assessing quality of each data set that we were connecting to our identity, and that's how we built Omni in the platform. I think that our clients are very aware of the issue, the quality issue with third-party data. It's been persistent over the years, and that's why they have so much interest in high quality data sets that are validated. Like that's the success of the United network, right? Like the Kinective, the media network that they have built, because the identity is so strong, because it's TSA validated. This is why this is how they have built their success. Axiom on our side, like we're working with 9 out of 10 retail banks in the US. We're working with all the credit bureaus. So all of this credentializes the data sets. And then this cycle of validations. And so there are a lot of data quality issues, but with the right testing, with the right model, and I think it was someone from Astra earlier who talked about transparency and how important it is. Like this is critical. Like we can't be in a black box anymore. The clients expect us to have transparency on match rate quality, on accuracy of the data sets, and we need to report on that and work on that with transparently with our clients.
And if there is one common strand I hear repeatedly, it's that when it comes to identity, money talks. In other words, subscriber relationships, credit card data, these things really are gold standard because these are the companies that genuinely keep a track on who you are, where you are, and so on. Rachel, give us your take. How does Epsilon help clients navigate around some of these data quality issues?
Yeah, absolutely. This is where I think our identity solution really shines. I think that data is great, but it's better if it's verified. I think Sebastian made a really great point that verified data is really where we're heading with the industry. We have our own data asset where we have credit card data and transaction data that's available where we can tie identity back to an individual, a purchase, a delivery, something that looks like that. But that level of validation is not available everywhere across the globe, right? So you have to kind of look at it as, in market, what is the gold standard for a verified data set, and how based on regulation, based on market penetration, based on internet availability, device availability, all of these different things are sort of contributing factors to how you can actually take your identity asset and use it to help validate some of that data that you have, whether it's data that you own or partner data or third-party data that your clients are bringing into the ecosystem, and sort of taking a look holistically and saying, okay, yes, in the US, we have a lot of data coverage, we have a lot of internet coverage, so it's a lot easier to have those conversations. Outside of the US, that's where things kind of get a little tricky and frankly a little more interesting and always a fun problem to solve, right? And so this is where we try to help our clients to say, hey, let us use our identity spine, let us use our identity data, which is different from like profile and attribute data, to help validate some of the attribute and profile data that we're seeing across the globe.
We're running fiendishly short of time. We have time for one final question, and I'd love, given the title of this showcase, to focus on innovation. So the three of you are at the absolute peak of your fields. You are industry leaders. You have the industry hanging on your every word or thereabouts. Give us a sense of where you expect to see real innovations and progress in this space in the next 3 to 5 years. Special prize if you could do it without mentioning AI, but I'm not convinced that's possible. Why don't we start with you, Rachel, and then we'll go Sebastian, and then we'll end with Aaron.
Sure, I would love to not say AI. that would be
hard
my
to do.
Yes, difficult to do. I think that the theme of the day seems to be transparency. Like I think that is where we are all going, and so we as identity and data people need to start bringing our solutions out into the light. I think that is where the innovation is going to happen. Once we can start really having open conversations around, this is how identity is constructed, this is the data that we're using to back it up, this is how we're validating, and this is how we're going to work with other players in the ecosystem. I think that's where we start to have a really great foundation for how we can create more innovation around this, right? How can we take this to the next level? How can we bring more data solutions, more insights, more innovation, more knowledge and understanding about consumers, so that brands and marketers can say, okay, it's not that I'm just going to be personalized, but I'm going to create a really unique and interesting and compelling, engaging experience for my consumers.
Awesome. Sebastian, where do we expect to see innovations? Where do you expect to see innovations in the next few years in this
I'll build
space?
on that. I've been like, if you look at the last 5 years, there's great improvements in terms of consumer privacy, and so that to me is the one of the biggest improvements that we have seen. Like, how do we create experiences that are not creepy for our consumers, and how can we still build that very personalized experience and that everybody's expecting now, without going too far in the so like the changes in privacy laws in the US that we've seen, the inability for us to use some more sensitive data around health, around ethnicity, in income, and all of this, I think, is really interesting in terms of defining and setting the standards for consumer experiences. So I think we are going to go to an even more personalized experience with brands, but in the context of increased privacy. And so I think this is the like finding the right balance in those players who are going to be able to find to walk that thin line between privacy and personalization. I think that this is what the innovation is going to be.
So hyper-personalization at scale in a privacy-compliant environment, that'll be an interesting space to watch. Aaron, the last word for you, a big innovation or improvement you're expecting in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think our dream of cross-platform identity and measurement will become a reality. I think we maybe not myself, but definitely Rachel and Sebastian will solve how to bring all of these disparate pieces together, and kind of with an eye towards outcomes as opposed to the proxy of reach and frequency. So we'll get that cross-platform measurement. We'll unify our ability to solve for identity, and identity becomes the basis for planning, investment, and measurement across every screen.
Well, I'm super hoping we can have the three of you back in 2028 to test your predictions and see how close to the money you were. But for now, we're going to have to press pause on that. Rachel, Sebastian, Aaron, thank you. That's been utterly fascinating. I could talk to the three of you for hours. However, we are now going to jump seamlessly on, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome another industry leader to the virtual stage, Erin Bodkins, VP of Product at LiveRamp, with a fascinating glimpse into taking identity back home, why CTV needs IP-based identity. Erin, over to you.
Thanks, John. I too have been really fascinated with the conversations today. I love all of the different perspectives on identity from the different identity industry leaders. I unfortunately will not make it through my presentation without saying the word AI as we talk through the evolution of identity in the agentic era. So as you've heard, today's conversation, it goes beyond marketing tactics. It's about the infrastructure that's required for the next phase of growth in our industry. It's what many are already referring to as the agentic era. As we shift from human-operated tools to increasingly autonomous AI systems, the role of identity changes. AI is no longer for just informing decisions. It's beginning to act on those decisions, optimizing media, personalizing experiences, and orchestrating journeys in real time. But as organizations adopt more and more AI capabilities, a clear pattern is emerging that we're observing. AI is highly dependent on the quality, accessibility, and consistency of the data beneath it. When data is fragmented across systems and when identifiers don't align, or when customer records are incomplete, the gaps don't disappear. They actually expand with AI. In many ways, AI makes existing data weaknesses even more visible. While AI can absolutely improve performance, we've seen it time and again, it requires a strong and stable foundation to deliver accurate and scalable results. And that foundation is identity. If identity is inconsistent or disconnected across the channels, devices, and environments, then intelligence becomes unreliable or unintelligible. Decisions become less precise, measurement becomes less trustworthy, and personalization becomes less effective. In the agentic era, identity is no longer just a marketing capability. It is a foundational infrastructure and a layer that enables intelligence to operate with confidence. So when we think about the different dimensions behind identity, we need to take a step back real quick before we dive totally into agentic. Let's talk about the why and the why of identity. You've heard it all day long. So I'm just going to double click on some of the points you've already heard. So we all know that identity is essential to connecting all the different touch points that define a user, and that it's also a requirement for ecosystem connectivity. But what some might not realize is that identity is multidimensional. And to have a truly robust and resilient and reliant identity graph, you need to constantly and consistently focus on all of these dimensions. This must be an evergreen initiative with sustained investment. A lack of investment in identity means a lack of investment in all outcomes for the company. It might seem obvious. So a few of these dimensions that are really important in identity include things like accuracy and completeness, configurability, persistence, flexibility. You heard this many times throughout the day. And this might seem obvious, but often trade-offs have to be made depending on the use case. Sometimes we trade off accuracy for the sake of reach, or we trade off consistency in favor of configurability, and so on. And while identity continues to evolve, as long as any of us can remember, these dimensions may take a slightly different shape, but will continue to be paramount to success in any platform that uses identity. So we'll take a look today at that evolution, starting where we are now with an identity that powers the ecosystem, moving to a more distributed, accessible, and privacy-forward identity, which is identity in the cloud. And finally, we'll talk about the future, where AI agents are going to play a starring role, like it or not. So let's talk about the challenge that we face. I think we're all pretty well familiar with the fact that we are now more associated with more phones, more emails, more devices, and yes, more TVs than at any point in our lives. And that number only continues to grow as we acquire more devices. Think about how many old iPhones or how many TVs you have in your house, how many old iPhones or iPads you have laying around. Let's just look at Liz, for example. She likely has many phone numbers, emails, devices that she uses to interact with the ecosystem. She will continue to gain additional points of contact. And just imagine if Liz were to get married. How many of you have used your spouse's email or phone number when filling out a form or browsing a website because you didn't want that, you wanted to save your inbox? Well, imagine if when she has kids and those kids become of age, you can see that the complexity doesn't grow linearly. It literally compounds. The more touch points, the more individuals, the more individuals in the household, the more complex all of this becomes. And without a unifying identity layer, each system sees a fragment. Marketing sees one version of a person while commerce sees another. Customer service may see a third. Media platforms might see something entirely different. And AI ends up with a completely confused data set. But the customer expects your brand to experience or to have a consistent experience across every interaction with your brand. They expect hyper-personalized, especially long-standing customers. But identity helps you bridge those gaps. So to connect these identifiers responsibly and accurately so that the systems and the brands see one customer, not 10 disconnected records. Because when you stabilize identity, everything built on top of it becomes intelligent. So we all know that we've long had the capability to resolve data. We've talked about all of the different data points that we resolve throughout the day, whether it's offline data points like names, postals, phones, and emails, or online data points like IP addresses, CTV IDs, maids, even cookies. And we've long had this capability, but typically in the past, this has required sending data across the internet. And while this is still an option, and many, many companies still employ this option, we now have a choice. The same great identity that we've experienced for years is now available in your cloud environment. Embedded identity allows companies to resolve, translate, and deconflict their data without sending that data out of their environment, with the added benefit of reduced latency due to the fact that there is non-movement of data. Talk about a round of applause from ISEC teams everywhere. This deconfliction is really an understated and under-talked about piece of identity. Well, we all know resolution involves associating a touch point to a single consolidated person, and that translation is what allows us to communicate across the ecosystem and speak the same language. Deconfliction is the anti-nacho cheese effect, meaning we know we all live in a world where we share touch points. So think back to my example of when Liz got married, maybe she put her husband's email in a form that was associated with her name. That email then becomes a shared touch point. And how do we determine if it's Liz's email or if it maybe is her husband's email? Which user should be more strongly associated to that email? That is in the power of deconfliction. So now we have completed the resolve step. We know Liz and we know Liz's touch points across online and offline devices and contact points. So now that we've completed this resolve step, it's time to connect that identity across the ecosystem. And this is where the real value is delivered. This is where companies can unlock powerful insights that will propel their business forward. And this is where the right collaboration partner can change the trajectory of your business. This is where the right collaboration network can make all of the difference. If you think about different partnerships like Apple and Nike, their partnership allowed them, through the power of data collaboration, to expand their businesses into new lines simultaneously. Both Nike and Apple can expand their wearable technology so that they can grow their business using both the Apple iWatch and the Nike Plus Runners app. There are many, many examples of this throughout the industry. If you've been recently watching the Super Bowl, you know that Uber Eats and the NFL are also collaboration partners, and that this is yielding big responses for their business. So now that you can connect your data and activate it anywhere using any identifier, because identity brings them all together, when you are part of a connected ecosystem, you can move from one channel or platform to the next with seamless interoperability. With this connected, interoperable ecosystem at your fingertips, you can activate data into and across your ecosystem to really have that hyper-personalized interactions with your customers that have the capability of being frequency capped even across all platforms. This unlocks a truly superior customer experience. But the story doesn't end there. That is where we are today. We have collaborated, we have shaped the industry, and we have worked together to build the ecosystem into what it is today. And now is not the time to slow down, nor take our foot off the gas. As you all may have noticed, we are in a rapidly changing world. And we are on the precipice of massive change. Likely, many or all of you have witnessed the power of AI agents. Perhaps you've unlocked some insight that you've been pursuing for a while, but now you have the data and the power and the compute power at your fingertips to really discover what that insight was. We are in a rapidly changing world, and we are moving into an era of agentic agents, an era with which we will use agents to search, perform purchases, and plan and book our vacations. And that's only in our personal life. It will also help us to achieve greater outcomes in our professional lives by leveraging AI to generate creative ads or to give us deeper insights on conversions that allow us to better optimize our campaigns. All of this happening in real time. And the time to experiment is now. So you may know or may have heard that LiveRamp recently donated an open protocol to the IAB Tech Lab. This protocol, now formally known as UCP or Universal Context Protocol, has been renamed to Agentic Audiences. What is Agentic Audiences, you might ask? This protocol provides a language for agent-to-agent communication. This protocol standardizes data sharing and audience discovery through privacy-preserving methods. It allows both the publisher and advertiser to use more information in a more robust way. If you will, a new identity. It allows users to drive campaigns that will outperform our traditional methods. There was a question earlier in the chat I saw that asked if we have thought about using embeddings and vectorized search to improve the results of identity. This is exactly what Agentic Audiences enables and unlocks. The protocol isn't about locking the ecosystem into a single standard. It's about unlocking all of the data that powers these agentic outcomes. Our partners are working closely with us to build a network of agents that will drive better outcomes for businesses through increased personalization, amplified reach, and higher conversion rates. The agentic era doesn't arrive fully formed. It's built by the choices we make now. Identity is the foundation, and the opportunity to design it deliberately together is what's at stake now. We can't wait to partner with you to build this new world. Thank you.
Erin, thank you so much. Interestingly, we had Tony Katzer from the Tech Lab talking a bit about some of the work on Agentic. So great to join the dots on those two things, and congrats on a really fascinating presentation. We, in the interest of timing, are going to leap heroically onwards, always onwards, to our next fabulous session. And I couldn't be more excited to welcome my friend and occasional partner in crime on stage, the brilliant Charlie Johnson from Digital Envoy, to the stage to talk a bit about how we can close CTV's identity gaps, and particularly how signal enrichment can make every screen addressable. So, Charlie, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you. Good evening, John. What a lovely introduction. But more, can I just say, this is one of the most intimidating moments. How do I follow so many presentations and the fireside and panels, etc.? I'm going to just take a moment and make an assumption that not everybody knows who Digital Envoy is. Even though we've been around for 26 years now, we are the specialists in IP data, which, coming off of the back of the way people have been talking, love the fact that Rachel from Epsilon described the IP fiasco, means I'm taking the stage at an interesting moment. But we've been looking at IP addresses now for many, many decades and understanding where they're located at that given moment. And a lot of the conversation today has been around some of those challenges. So we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail as we think about how IP addresses work when it comes from a CTV point of view, and what you can do, and talk to you through a little bit about what LockID is doing to try and solve that, as it was something we learned from our cybersecurity customers, which is interesting. So as I hopefully move on, fabulous. When we think about CTV identity, and you've got to bear in mind that for us, this is a newer space. So we've got a lot of experts that have come on here. We come back at things very much from an IP address point of view. And one of the things that we learned is that the majority of identity solutions seem to be built for some sort of one-to-one, like a one phone for one user, and then expanding out from that. But of course, with CTV, that's not the case, right? It's about multiple people. It's absolutely about multiple devices and screens, and in a sort of IoT world and your connected devices, it's even potentially your fridge. If you happen to live with that one person, I do live with that one person, and I wouldn't dare give his email address out in a form by any stretch. But a household isn't about one person, right? Or one device. It's 2 parents, 3 kids, 4 remotes, a Roku, a Fire Stick, an Apple TV, and at least one person out there yelling, "Who touched the Wi-Fi?" And what we're finding a lot of people doing is trying to pretend that that's a single user ID and make that mapping there. It's not, it's device IDs, it's brand IDs, and many fancy deterministic signals that are out there, which do a great job when you think about things from a one-person point of view. But as we've heard from some of the many other people that have been speaking, what happens when you think about it from a household point of view and potentially just one sort of IP address that sits around it? So when we look at this, fragmentation really isn't just a nerdy puzzle that's sitting there. It's a real business consequence, right? Targeting can become inaccurate. Measurement gets extremely noisy. The campaign performance looks worse than it actually is, and that in itself is frustrating. Or maybe even more alarming, it looks better than it actually was. And the budgets don't translate to predictable outcomes. It's kind of like having that sort of GPS signal that tells only half of the devices where you are and then eventually gives up and has a bit of a guess. Guessing really isn't what we're built on when we're thinking about performance, and CTV and the identity piece is very much thinking about measurement from a household level. And we're basically trying to measure household behavior with individual tools, which it kind of just doesn't work. But if you're relying on an IP address, then that really does become essential that you're sitting there. So what is the key here, right? The CTV is inherently a household medium, right? Traditional TV has always been thought of as in households. And when you watch something together, the ad is seen by the household. That is the unit value, and that's the main sort of way in which people would think about it. Yet digital addressability is far more obsessed with the individual. And we've seen that when we look at other mediums and we see the cookie and the device ID and the user token. It just won't cut it when you're talking about CTV. We need an identity approach that reflects very much on how people watch and why household identity will potentially matter. And sit from that point of view, right? And go from there. So then why is IP the sort of natural anchor here? Because IP is, okay, some might think it's a little dated, and sort of 1999 of us, which I do remember, good year, had a lot of fun, but it is still the perfect sort of household for identity anchors, right? Why is that? All devices are connecting to that IP address at home. You don't sit at your house and attach to your neighbor's Wi-Fi unless you don't have Wi-Fi yourself, right? You're all attaching to that same IP address. In a lot of ways, IP addresses are stable, and we're going to come back to that because that's a topic of conversation that we've been talking about, and it's something that we're used to, and we see it in the bid stream already. A lot of the plumbing of ad tech is built around using an IP address. And importantly, and we've seen some really interesting conversation today, that we've seen a lot of people talking about how privacy is very important. IP addresses are privacy compliant when handled and used correctly. So that can give you a scale that you might not see in other senses. TV connects content to the household. In a world where every house has Netflix and Hulu, Prime, Disney, Max, Peacock, something called Freevee that none of us remember signing up for, the only thing that we've all got in common of that is the IP address, which is connecting all services, all TVs, all devices, all internet-enabled pieces that might be sitting there. So bear with me one sec. You've heard today, as you've probably been sitting there thinking, is she really telling us we're trusting an IP when we've just heard lots of people? And we've seen the really good work that CIMM and TruthSet did about how IP addresses are not sort of a perfect medium. And that study with IP to postal and IP to email linkages came out and said it's a 13 to 16% accuracy all of the time, which for context is rather like my ability to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions, or maybe even with instructions. I have about a 13% success rate, but that's not really good for building out your marketing strategy and your brands. If you're trying to tie and use next to a raw IP as your identity signal, you may be hitting, the study came out and said 3 cents of every dollar that's out there. So the question is, why is this? And when that study came out, we were aware of it, and we were really excited about the work because we've been doing a lot in cybersecurity that's been looking at the stability, or perhaps we should say the instability of IP addresses. But there's many different reasons. IPs change all the time. You turn off your router, it's being reassigned at the ISP level. Providers are reporting different results. The report talks a lot about timestamps inconsistency, or V6 IP addresses being massively underrepresented, and each provider defining their first scene differently. So what do we do if the IP address is still important to us, but we're not trusting its stability, perhaps? So this was one of the things that we were asked to think about over at Digital Envoy. We have the most amount of experience with working with IP addresses independently, the phenomenal amount of raw data that comes in. And I'd love to take credit. So you're going to hear me using the word we. It was not me. It's very much the royal we. Started to think about things a little bit differently. Do you look at the top example on this image? You can see that in the space of a month, one IP address at a household has changed 4 times, right? There's 4 different IP addresses. But what hasn't moved is the house. So if we, as over at LockID, understand the actual location of where the house is, we can stabilize that. The household's not got up and moved around. This is actually staying in the same place. So we can assign that with its own stable identity and collect the signals across many different environments, web, mobile. We can analyze that stability, whether it's stayed in the right place or whether it's removed. We can also potentially cluster the devices that are within that household. So what other maids are sitting on that IP address? What other IP addresses is that maid going on to? And validate and stabilize that household over time and the identity signals that sit there. So rather than saying this is an IP that we're using, this is far more about thinking this is a stable household. This is the difference between guessing who's there and knowing who is actually there. So it's coming at things from a very different viewpoint when we look at this. So what LockID is doing is we're taking that IP signal and making it its own household anchor, making it durable and useful. We see every single IP address every single day that we're looking at, and we're understanding the exact location of where it's coming in based on the data. Instead of making each random IP look like it's gospel, we're looking at certain key points, We might be looking at things like the signal stability. We can weight the temporal persistence that's happening around that IP address and that household, and cluster the devices and different household graphs and make all the other data very interesting that sits around it, and reduce all of that noise and churn. Get away from these situations where somebody says that they have mapped a household mapped the US to 800 million households. I might be English, but I know there's not 800 million. But this doesn't reject the IP address, which is synonymous for CTV and is used across many different signals. And it can create its own sort of household identity spine rather than a shaky identity signal that people might be using. And it can behave far more predictably than we might be seeing with other areas. So if you bear with me 1 second, I'm almost finished because I just got the warning. I'm going to get music played off stage in a minute. That's brilliant. So as we're thinking about CTV and how it's exploding, but the identity and performance has actually held us back. It's not for a lack of trying. It's not for a willfulness. It's the fact that these IP addresses are fidgety so-ons and they move around. But household identity is very much the bridge between those fragmented protocols and diverse different devices that might be sitting there, whilst also factoring in privacy regulation. I believe Kemal was talking about this. I completely agree with what he's saying. But if we stabilize around that household, we can start thinking about better targeting and measurement, far more optimization about what somebody is doing, and understanding a lot more about the decisions that people are making and all the other enriched data that we have that's sitting there. I think I'm in time. Thank you.
Charlie, one of your many great characteristics is you're always on time. So a massive thank you. That was fascinating. It's been so exciting actually, seeing that journey from instability to solutions. So thank you so much for sharing some of that with us. I'm sure we'll be returning to that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now moving on to our final session. Can you believe it? And we are going to end with a bang. We're super delighted to welcome the brilliant Mark Shepherd, Executive Director of Addressable Activation at Freewheel, with a very different debate or discussion about the identity topic, looking at signal enrichment. So I'm super delighted to welcome Mark to the stage. Mark, take it away.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Let's see if we can control screen. All right, so far so good. All right, everybody. I am Mark Shepard. I lead addressable activation at Freewheel, which is part of Comcast. I am actually pretty excited to be with you today. I love this stuff. So let's get into it. Today, I want to talk about a problem this group knows well, and that is how do we build a reliable identity layer for TV inventory that has no reliable identifier? So a couple points from today. So Rachel at Epsilon gave us what might be the catchphrase of the summit: persistent and consistent. I love that. And Charlie just set us up really, really well to talk about how we find creative ways to stabilize IPs into something more deterministic. So we're going to hit on all of that over the next few minutes. And here we go. So I'm going to show you what we've built using Comcast deterministic data for both linear TV and FAST, and why we think this changes the measurement equation for converged TV. The identity gaps we'll cover today hurt our entire ecosystem's measurement credibility. And so I'm going to be speaking primarily about what we're initially doing by leveraging Comcast data to solve some of these issues, but I'm here today to encourage others to also replicate these approaches. So here we go. This is the claim I am making. Whether the inventory starts with no signal or a broken one, we can attach a deterministic identity signal to it. And that changes everything. It changes how it's bought, how it's measured, and what it's worth. So let's start by grounding us in the scale of linear TV. If we could digitize the supply. Now, if you've quietly written off linear TV, I'm not going to tell anyone. You don't have to say anything right now, but let's look at the current state based on 2025 data. First, the average US viewer watched almost 2.5 hours of linear TV per day. CTV outpaced this by only 6 minutes. Linear still drives 6 times more ad impressions than CTV, in large part due to heavier ad loads. And before we discount those heavier ad loads, let's not forget that linear consistently outperforms CTV on brand metrics by a factor of 3 or even more, from message association to brand favorability to ad awareness and even purchase intent. And finally, total US TV ad spend is about $85 billion. Of that, $52 billion, or 61%, is still going to linear TV. And the remaining $33 billion is CTV. I think we can all agree that if we can find a way to quickly activate and measure linear TV, similar to what is available today on most CTV supply, we will have a game-changing opportunity on our hands. Okay, so let's briefly talk about programmatic TV, starting with CTV. Oh, this one looks fun, doesn't it? All right, don't worry about whatever happened on this slide. That's the percentage of, so 85% that you see in the middle there, that is the percentage of impressions that were purchased programmatically in 2025. That's the vast majority, which you can forgive the programmatic pun. For linear TV, you can kind of see embedded down there, it's the inverse. It's 15%. And that 15% is really, it's like any automation. So it's automated buying, it's programmatic guaranteed. And if we constrain this to just linear addressable, we drop from 15% down to 3%. Very little is PMP-based buying, as an example, where we can do the kind of audience-level decisioning that makes CTV so powerful today. So the question then is why hasn't programmatic buying taken hold on linear? And here's my argument. It's because we have an identity gap. What you may not realize is that the industry has done a tremendous amount of work to digitally enable linear TV. I spent years at a cable joint venture on linear addressable technical enablement, and I know firsthand how much went into this. And I can tell you with real confidence that the infrastructure to do this exists. You can dynamically insert ads. Creatives can be trafficked automatically. The programmatic and the measurement systems are all built, but they've been largely inactive without demand-side identity. There's been no IP address, no identifier a DSP can transact on. That means no invalid traffic or IVT filtering, no demand-side targeting, nothing to digitally measure. It's like we built a house, but we never added the street address. And the delivery trucks, the kind that deliver 30-second spots, they've just been driving right past us, at least until now. So quick recap. Linear TV digital supply, it exists. The demand exists. The technical programmatic capabilities exist. But what's missing is a reliable identity layer that can enrich these signals. And that's what we've built, starting with Comcast data. So let's talk about the how. When inventory from a Comcast set-top box enters Freewheel, it carries a proprietary ID, but that's a signal that DSPs can't understand. And the goal here is a standardized, interoperable identity. Freewheel's identity network starts by translating that proprietary ID into a household IPv4, which is the universal signal every buyer already knows how to activate against. That's the public IPv4 assigned to the household's broadband connection, the same IP that every connected device in the home shares, which is exactly why this enables cross-screen deduplication. A linear impression enriched with this IP is immediately matchable to a CTV or a fast impression from any device in the same household. Of course, we could translate this to other identifiers as well, but let's use household IPv4 as our working example. So look at the bid request on the screen. On the left, before enrichment, there's no usable ID. After enrichment, a standard IP address is in the device object. The DSP doesn't actually know or care. Now it just looks like addressable CTV supply. And importantly, these enriched signals are designed to pass standard IVT validation so DSPs can transact with the same confidence they have on native CTV supply. This linear supply now immediately has the same targeting capabilities, the same measurement capabilities, and the same workflows as CTV. So let's set linear aside for a second and talk about the streaming and digital equivalent to linear, which is the rise of fast channels. Again, let's ground ourselves in some facts. We're seeing explosive growth on fast, with ad views up 17% year over year. 43% of TV viewers are now watching fast, and 87% of fast reach is incremental to traditional TV campaigns. So this is supply advertisers should be increasingly tapping into, yet fast supply continues to exceed demand. Total ad spend on fast is approximately $6 billion, which you can see in the dark purple here. So we have the $52 billion of linear TV ad spend we discussed earlier, and $6 billion in fast. And the remaining is CTV, with fast now excluded. Well, I'm not sure what happened there. A couple fun things. We're going to make this a probabilistic versus deterministic observation. The probabilistic is when you're missing parts of your presentation, but we're going to roll with it. All right, so on linear, there's no IP, there's no device ID, there's no signal at all. The inventory is invisible to programmatic systems. But on fast, as you can see here, we have a quickly growing source of supply that's fully digital. It's fully programmatic. There's an IP address available. But critically, most fast supply is unauthenticated. You tune to a fast channel. Similar to traditional linear TV, you're just watching content. But unlike linear TV, you're not likely a known subscriber. The ease of viewing is the beauty of fast, but it's also its Achilles heel. We've heard a bunch today about the recent CIMM Go Addressable truth set study from last fall, where it became clear that IP as an identifier is not particularly reliable. And in the case of fast, there's no first-party ID to pair with it. On top of that, even if we had a first-party ID, password sharing can make even authenticated signals unreliable. Got one account, many households, and we're targeting the wrong household and even the wrong city. Both problems, linear TV and fast, need the same thing: a deterministic match to the actual household receiving the ad. Let's pause for a second to revisit that CIMM Go Addressable truth set study. Only 13% of the time were inference-based data providers able to match IP to household address data. Furthermore, those inference-based providers only agreed with each other about 6% of the time. It's about as often as my 4 kids agree on anything. The study used ISP-level deterministic data as the ground truth benchmark, the exact category of data we're applying here. It's not inferred, not modeled, but known at the network level. So let's talk about how we can enrich the IP address in a fast ad request to something deterministic. As we said, most fast viewers never log in, so the publisher has an IP address, but no user identity. Using Comcast data, we can deterministically resolve that IP to the household behind it. And as we just discussed, the difference between inference-based IP matching and ISP-level resolution is the difference between 13% and ground truth. So this works regardless of the device. The resolution's at the network level, not the device level. So a Comcast subscriber watching Tubi on their Roku has a Comcast IP and can be deterministically matched. There's a second use case here too that I think is incredibly interesting. When viewers are authenticated, and this could even be applied for general CTV, password sharing means the publisher's first-party ID can point to the wrong household entirely. This IP to household match sees where the ad is actually served and resolves to that household, regardless of who's logged in. So for publishers dealing with credentials sharing at scale, this enriched signal can actually be more reliable than their own authentication. Now, here's a key distinction from the linear path. On linear, the enrichment flows outbound. DSPs see an enriched bid request with an IP address, something we've already validated with multiple DSPs. On fast, the enrichment currently operates within FreeWheel's sell-side decisioning layer. The IP was already present in the bid request. What we've done is verify who that IP belongs to, and it powers more accurate targeting, frequency capping, and measurement on the sell side. Now, as we map these household signals to interoperable identity frameworks, this precision will increasingly flow to the buy side as well. Now, let's take a second and just talk briefly about privacy, because I know it's top of mind, especially when we're talking about these types of data. So let me make 3 points. The Comcast data we use operates within existing subscriber consent. All resolution happens server-side within FreeWheel. Buyers never see raw Comcast data. And both publishers and buyers retain control over what gets enriched and what gets activated. This isn't a workaround. It's built for where the industry is headed. And these things would all be true of any data that we might incorporate into FreeWheel's identity network. And it's one of the reasons we're really excited about the prospect of incorporating other deterministic data assets to expand beyond just homes covered by Comcast. Okay, so you've seen both paths, different starting points, but they converge into the same ecosystem. As soon as we can get to our next slide. Maybe somebody can help me. There we go. All right. Linear goes from 0 signal to a fully addressable bid request. Fast goes from an unreliable signal to a verified household identity within FreeWheel's graph. The result for buyers and sellers is the same: inventory that can be targeted, frequency capped, and measured with confidence. One workflow regardless of where the impression originates. Now, it's critical here to acknowledge this works within the Comcast footprint, which is about 29 million broadband households. As I said in the beginning, our industry needs multiple deterministic sources working together for measurement credibility. So what we're showing is what becomes possible when ISP-level data is applied. We're hoping this inspires similar approaches from other distributors, and we've built FreeWheel's identity network to accept deterministic data from sources well beyond Comcast. In fact, today, FreeWheel's identity network can waterfall to probabilistic matching after exhausting all deterministic attempts. But the more deterministic data that is available, of course, the higher quality the ultimate outcome. And this architecture, just to be clear, is designed for what comes next. So as IPv6 adoption expands, as carrier-grade NAT means multiple households can now share a single IPv4, IP alone will not be sufficient. So this identity layer is built to incorporate multiple signal types, which is exactly why the universal ID roadmap matters as well. The same infrastructure enriching signals with IP today is ready to layer in universal IDs as they scale. So let's see this in practice. Can I get help going to the next slide? There we go. Here we have a high-end restaurant group in Newport Beach. They define their audience: dining enthusiasts, high-income household, prime time. And that campaign now flows across CTV, programmatic linear, and fast. Same audience, same frequency caps, same measurement framework. The buyer is not managing 3 separate buys. The enrichment layer has made all 3 inventory types addressable. So that is, my friends, convergence in practice and not just on a slide deck, I promise. All right, I'm going to leave you with 3 things. Maybe. Can I get to the next slide? There we go. All right. First, signal enrichment is solving two problems at once, creating identity on linear and correcting identity on other supply pools like fast. Second, the system is deterministic first. Every impression gets the highest quality signal available, and as that CIMM study showed, the gap between inference and deterministic is not marginal. It's 13% versus ground truth. And last, converged measurement across linear, fast, and CTV is here. And as universal ID adoption grows, the same infrastructure is ready to enrich signals beyond IP. Thank you.
Mr. Shepherd, talk about ending our showcase on a real bang. That was absolutely fascinating. Couldn't be more grateful. I would love to extend and invite you to come and do something similar at CIMM East, which, as all of you know, I'm sure, is on March 31st in New York at the Paramount White Room, where we'll be going really deep into measurement. That rounds out our showcase. I wanted to say an enormous thank you to the innovators, tech gurus, and identity leaders who took their time out to present the state of the art. I personally have been sitting here scribbling furiously. That's been incredible food for thought. We are going to make the recordings available as clips of the different sessions. We're also going to, as I mentioned, be publishing a short paper summarizing some of the latest innovation in the Ramba space. I want to say a massive thank you to my three brilliant colleagues, Marzena, Chris, and India, for their incredible help putting together all of this and making sure that nothing fell over, which is brilliant. And of course, needless to say, I'd like to say an enormous thank you to the brilliant Sable Me, whose inspired leadership of the Identity Group is absolutely invaluable to our efforts. We will be continuing to debate many of these innovations and opportunities for improvement in that group. There is a genuinely valuable program of work taking shape and some really interesting efforts and initiatives coming to the fore. So a massive thank you, Sable. Sable, any final words from you before we close?
No, two things. One is we know there are a lot of questions coming during the presentations that some of those we weren't able to address in real time. We will follow up. So if you could provide your email address, we'll make sure that we follow up through it. Some of those we couldn't identify. So reach out to us. We make sure that we get answers to you. And again, please consider joining our working group, but we really will drill down some of the tough questions. You know, we don't throw softballs. So if you want to make progress, join us. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.